Welcome to Rock and Roll Fridays, a podcast on musical encounters
Welcome
and
to
life.
Rock and Roll Fridays, and I'm so happy to have a guest so I don't have to talk. I have a great guest tonight, Marc Donovan. Marc Donovan is a actor. Can I say vocalist? Is that fair?
Sure.
Teacher, and also, most importantly, my neighbor and friend. So welcome, Marc.
Thanks for having me, Mike. It's a pleasure to be here.
Marc, in the acting world, and I know this from my advertising world, working with people on commercials, it's all, what has he been in? What has she been in? Right? Like I'm probably, you get that all the time. Well, Marc,
a lot of times you tell people you're an actor, and they sort of force you to recite your resume for that.
Right. Well, the same in advertising. People are like, "Well, what have you worked on?" I was like, I better tell them something that they know, right?
Right.
But Marc, you've worked on One Life to Live, All My Children, The Young and the Restless. You were in Boardwalk Empire as Captain Ramsey, if I remember correctly.
Sheriff Ramsey, yeah.
Sheriff Ramsey. See, I
Deputy
even lowered
Ramsey.
you.
Well, I was lower to begin with. I was Deputy Ramsey, and it was like a small, like possibly recurring role. And we joked about, and sorry, spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't watched season 3 of Boardwalk Empire, we joked about how, if the sheriff gets knocked off, which is, pretty common in a show like that, everybody gets, bumped off, then I'll get promoted and my role will get bigger. Well, guess what happened? And 5 episodes later,
right. They were like, we like Marc. We're gonna make him the head honcho in the police department.
Or they just wanted to light somebody on fire because it looked cool, and then
and now most recently, you are filming for Godfather of Harlem with Forest Whitaker. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yes, on EPIX.
On EPIX. Very cool. And so let's talk about, first let's talk about acting, right? And
Sure.
Obviously the show is music for my podcast, but I kind of always think about actors and musicians as artists, right? And what is the thing about acting that kind of, and I know you've worked in, we'll get into details around working with musicians, but what kind of drove you into acting and wanting to be an artist in the first place?
Well, I mean, I was kind of born into it. My parents, even though they both had regular quote unquote jobs, my mom was a special ed teacher, my dad worked in Social Security, they met doing community theater. And I grew up as that was one of my activities, right alongside with playing, Little League and traveling soccer and, basketball and all kinds of other stuff. But that, and it started as just like one of my hobbies, but it turned into my passion, and that.
Oh, Marc, I think we lost your recording.
A little bit in the direction of teaching as well, because of my mom's background, as a teacher. And so I think that's why full circle, I've sort of come into a little bit of that myself. But as a performer, I just always loved, I feel like I've always been a student of watching theater, watching films, analyzing things, making it work. And I think it started as a mimic, before I found my own voice, and before it was just kind of like, I can do that. Like when I first started doing voiceovers, I was like, the reason I was good at it was because I could hear something and I could do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Then you got to dive deeper, and obviously you got to find your own voice. You got to find how you connect to the character, not just sort of a sort of mock up of somebody else. And that takes time and that takes work, but it is an art form that I think is really fantastic on a bunch of levels. Obviously, creating a character, becoming someone else, expressing yourself through acting, song, whatever it is. But also it's communication skills. You know what I mean? Like, and that's what I tell the kids that I teach, because it doesn't matter whether you're going to go on to do this as an actor, as a performer. These skills will serve you in life, because you need these skills in a job interview, in you know what I mean, if you're above somebody in an employer situation, if you're below somebody, it's all like reading body language, facial expression, all of those things. And that sort of hyper awareness, I think, is something that is really fascinating and important to life. So
I think a lot of people, like sport, like athletes. When they watch sports, they think these athletes just walk onto the field and perform. And my experience on the advertising side, doing photo shoots and doing commercials, it's a long day. And actors, the amount of work they spend on a set or on a performance, not only in rehearsals, but during the work of the given day, is kind of insane at times. And I don't think enough people know what goes on into a 5-minute shoot for Boardwalk Empire. They think it just takes 15 minutes, like my podcast. Not at all, right? Can you talk a little bit about the grind and the performance and the time effort it takes on a set?
Yeah, and Boardwalk Empire is a great example because it's very specific. It's set. First of all, it's Martin Scorsese, produced it. So, and HBO. So there's a lot of money behind it. First of all, which allows you then to create this world, right? And especially when it's so time era specific. We shot all of my stuff because I was the sheriff of a small town called Tabor Heights, made up town, but based on a real town, and we shot it on Staten Island, in a historic town that they sort of made. They used what was there, but then they built stuff on top of it. And I'm telling you, you could not tell where the stuff that was there ended and the stuff that they created until you know what I mean. You kind of like pick something up and you went, oh wow, like oh yeah. Or you saw the back of it. I saw this diner that they built. I thought it was there.
Right.
And then I saw the back end of it. I was like, oh, that's plywood. It's because you go inside of it and the coffee rings on the counter look like they've been there for ages, and you know what I mean, like stuff like that. There's a guy, the amount of crew, extras, whatever else, the amount of people on set doing this job, that job. I like to tell the story that there's one guy, we were doing a night shoot and they had to make it nice and like a nice sort of dark eerie feel because it was like the cops meeting up with the youngsters and whatever else, and his job was literally to sit in this water truck and then like water the street just to make it look, you know what I mean, like sort of shiny and ominous and whatever else.
Right.
And that was his job. And he sat there, you know what I mean? It was a 15-hour day. And that's what he's there for. And everybody's got a very specific job. And it's the detail. Because I did 4 costume fittings for that. Before that role even turned into a 5-episode arc, it was a small little thing. I had like 1 line, but I had 4 fittings just to make it right. I learned how to drive a Model T because that was, you know what I mean? Like all of that stuff. It's amazing. And when you see it from like a producer perspective, you sort of step back and go, oh my God, like the amount that goes into that, it's not a small feat, theater isn't a small feat either, but it's a very, it's a time sensitive thing. You rehearse, you do it, and then you do the show. And it's a completely different thing. Like you're saying, a 15-hour day on set yields you what, maybe 5 minutes of footage sometimes. Whereas, you're going to rehearse for a couple months and then you're going to do the show and it's going to be a 2.5-hour thing. You got to be on the whole time,
Right. And that's why I compare it to athletes, right?
Yeah.
You practice and you try to perform when the time comes. And you mentioned theater, and that's so much different than shooting, film or television, because you're kind of exposed live, right? There's no rehearsal. You're out there.
You can't just cram that like one scene that you're shooting that day and like make sure just those lines and worry about the next one. You got to know it all, and it's all got to be like muscle memory, or else something could go really wrong. But that's the excitement of live theater. You know what I mean? That's what's the high that you get from it is incredible, because it is like it's all or nothing.
Yeah. So one of the things you've done in theater, coming back to music, is play Johnny Cash. And that was something I definitely wanted to talk to you about. Talk to me about what that role was like. What was it like performing as Johnny Cash and acting as Johnny Cash? And how did you prepare and kind of get your mind around that role?
Well, Johnny, me playing Johnny was kind of a long time coming, because I'd always been a fan. He'd always been on my radar, It was something I always enjoyed. But I knew I could sing it, but I was never, although I always wanted to pick up the guitar for the longest time and really learn. Like I really kept putting it off and putting it off. And it wasn't until I was in this production that you see right behind me, was in Vegas for 4 years, the Las Vegas like sort of sit down of that show after the national tour. And I played Sam Phillips, who was actually, the sort of non-musical role that he plays more of the narrator role. But always sort of pining for that, even though Sam is, I mean, he's a fantastic role. It's really his story, his show. But the guys that get the glory are Johnny Cash, Elvis Presley, Carl Perkins, and Jerry Lee Lewis.
Yeah.
And to do that and to embody that. So I picked up guitar a little bit from the guys that were around me, really inspired by their musicianship. And honestly, like the way I got that job was hilarious because I put myself on tape, like just, after doing sort of cram session with one of my buddies and really learning it. And I just laid down 2 songs. And then I saw this audition come up and I was like, and this is after the biggest show had closed, and it was a regional theater production that needed a Johnny Cash. And I was like, send the tape and we'll see what happens. But then, thinking, oh crap, I'm gonna have to get a call back and I'm gonna have to really like, show that I gotta go live. Well, no, I got offered the role without even, so much as a callback. So then I'm like, man, I really got to learn how to play guitar. so then luckily there was a couple months in hand before I went up to, it was upstate New York. And yeah, I drilled it every night. And Johnny was not the best guitar player. You know what I mean? It's more about his storytelling and his
voice.
Yeah, but it's got to be really inherent in you, because it's like that boom chicka boom chicka boom chicka boom chicka boom. It's got to be really solid, and you lose that rhythm, and it throws you off. And it's one thing. I mean, I've always been a singer, but it's one thing to sing and play at the same time, walking and chewing gum. I mean, it really is, and especially at my age, sort of learning it. It'd be one thing if that was ingrained in me for a really long. So I mean, that was a lot of the preparation, but of course, also like I had to really delve into, I mean, Johnny's got, the play takes place kind of on his rise, so he doesn't have quite as many demons at that point, but he does, I mean, his brother died early. He had a rough relationship with his father. So there was some stuff there. But it was before he sort of like really hit the drugs and alcohol and stuff like that a little bit. So it's a really kind of, important moment in time. But yeah, more than anything, I would say it's really about, in that show, it's about creating the band, because everybody's playing and singing live, and that's something that was a little bit foreign to me. I had front bands before, a little bit singing and stuff like that, but like playing, and gelling with the drummer and the bassist and a guitarist, and all that stuff. That was new to me, and I really was like, I felt the pressure of like, I got to keep up. Like, this is not fake, this is for real.
This is real. Yeah.
So, but you all kind of, raise the bar for each other and hold each other accountable. And so that was a really cool experience.
Was it different thinking about when you're acting around? I mean, you've played, a cop or Johnny Cash, I mean, I guess that's the joy of acting, right? You can become all these characters. But do you go into a different mindset being a musician, knowing you have to play guitar and sing? Like, is there a different energy going into that role?
Yeah, I would say it's really hard not to, like, because you're multitasking so much, it's hard to not piecemeal it a little bit. There's definitely, like, I sort of had to separate out the singing and the playing and the acting, and and the way it's structured, it allows you to do that, because usually it's sort of like a jam session when they're playing, and then there's sort of acting scenes, within. So it's a little easier to separate, but you really have to, like, sort of, try to find a way to meld it all together. Whereas obviously if you're playing a cop in a TV show, it's much more just about being in the moment, being true to the character and the script and all of that, and reacting. They always say acting is reacting, and that's really what it is. Like, knowing, and that's the thing about knowing what you're doing as well as you can, and being complete, like that muscle memory that I'm talking about. Because, like, if you do that, then you are open to responding. If not, you're in your head, you're kind of going like, what's my next line? What am I doing? What are my own choices? But you don't really have to make those choices if you are really connected with an actor and able to do that. And it's tough because, like, when you're doing a shoot, it's like go time, you know what I mean? And you are on the spot. And it's like, you really have to sort of, like, you feel the pressure. You know that like, okay, they don't want
to keep doing this.
Yeah, they don't want to do 17 takes until you feel like you get it right.
Every take is money.
Right.
Every take
exactly.
is time. Yeah.
Yeah. And you also know that like, maybe the other person in that take nails it. And like, you know what I mean? Like, why are they going to want to like keep going just so you can catch what you feel is, so it is just kind of, having to be on every time, which is tough.
And also I think in the role, like playing Johnny Cash, every night you were performing was almost like a live concert in itself.
Yeah.
I mean, you were putting on a live performance, but it was a concert, right? So the sound from the night before is different than the next night. And that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And in Vegas, let me tell you, like, I mean, I didn't do Cash in Vegas. I did the other role, but even more so, it was really interesting because like Vegas is not a theater town. You know what I mean? Like Vegas is, I mean, it's a crazy, crazy world. And people.
Yeah. How long did you live in Vegas?
Almost 4 years. About 4 years.
So talk about the role, because the role in Vegas was more, you were kind of the table setter, if you will, right? And
it was kind of like, so Sam Phillips is the famous, Memphis recording studio producer that, basically gave all those guys their start, including Johnny. And so you see like through flashbacks how he met Johnny, how he sort of like coached him, Elvis as well. Like he's the one that got Elvis on the radio first, and then he signed him to another record label, and the rest is history or whatever. But that's where a lot of it started. And this is based on, it's very loosely, but based on an actual night where all these 4 icons got together at the same time. Jerry Lee Lewis was like a baby. He was just there as a session piano player for Carl Perkins, like, follow-up record or whatever to Blue Suede Shoes, which was his song before Elvis's. And so it's a fascinating moment in time. And Sam kind of guides you through all of that, through what's in the present, but also how he met each one of these guys, kind of, coached them along. So even though it's structured and a lot of it is just, it's just an excuse for them to jam in the studio, instead of like recording the record that they're supposed to be doing, they're just like jamming out. Cause why wouldn't you? Of course, you know what I mean? Like, hey, this one? Yeah. This gospel tune, like that's all they did. And there's actual recording of it. And cause Sam just hit record. That's what he did. It was the smartest thing he could ever do. He just was like, let's see what happens, and so that's what they did. So a lot of it feels like a concert, right? But then there are those bits where you need to like find out what's going on in the story. And let me tell you, I've seen people FaceTime in the front row. I've seen people talk back to me, like, as I'm like, cause I talk directly to the audience a lot. Narrating. You're like, this happened. And there's this really like, quiet moment at the end of the show. And, I'm trying to tell, they show the famous picture of the 4 of them around the piano. And I'm like, really being reminiscent about it. Maybe just a little bit wispy about it, whatever. It's a very quiet moment. This lady from the 3rd row goes, "Do you sing?"
I was going to say, I'm sure in Vegas, nobody is drinking at these shows.
Oh God. Yeah. And of course you got the hammered people that just don't understand that they're not supposed to be, it's very interactive. It's like, like cheer, clap, laugh, all that. But like when I'm talking, and that's how you felt. Like a lot of times they were just like, shut up. Why are you talking? I just want to hear them play, But at the same time, when it was raucous and when they were rocking the house, I mean, it was just, it blew the roof off.
That's awesome.
Because these people have been gambling and drinking and whatever, and they're like, yeah. So it was.
That's
cool.
awesome. So in your, the premise of my show is always, what I say, normal people like me or you get to meet their musician or their bands or actor, famous people, right? You have run-ins. I've been lucky enough to meet some of my favorite bands. Like, you're in the entertainment industry. Is there a story that you have that you're like, wow, I can't believe I met this person or talked to this person, right? I mean, I know you've been in scenes with Nicolas Cage, right? Like,
well, yeah, and that came from Vegas, actually. That's a good tie-in because like, so we had a lot of celebrities come see that show, and took, photos backstage with Nicolas Cage. Actually, he initially came with Vince Neil, right? He's like good buddies with Vince Neil. So they show
it's so random.
Yeah, so random. But yeah, no, they're like crazy drinking buddies. Both very interesting cats, let me tell you. But Nicolas Cage came back multiple times. Loved the show. He's a big Elvis fan. His one of his wives is Elvis's daughter or whatever.
Daughter,
right?
yeah.
At one point. So and he was like, he loved it, and he was like, I'm gonna come back and bring my son. He's gonna love this, and he did. And so the second time he came back, he was like, he pulled me aside and he was like, listen, I think you're a really good actor, and do you have a card or something? I think it's like, yeah. So I'm like running my dressing room going like,
Mark, that's where you should be like, have your agent call my agent.
Yeah, right. Well, so I gave him the card, and then I thought, and I didn't, see him again for like a year. I was like, oh, well, that ship had sailed. Well, all of a sudden we hear that like he made reservations under his own name, which, I was surprised at, and he was coming to the show. Well, I happened to be walking in Harris, and I'm like, and there was something in town going on. I forget what it was, but he like fit right in. But he sometimes dresses, it's not incognito. He was in like, I don't know if it was rhinestones or whatever, but like something cowboy boots or whatever, sticking out like a sore thumb. So of course he probably thought like some crazy fan, because I like tapped him on the shoulder.
You're like, yo, what's up?
Like, and I was like, no, hey, he was like, oh, hey, I'm so glad I saw you. Listen, come up to the restaurant. My manager's up there. We're coming to see the show. Blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay. And so that's what they did. I talked to them. They came to see the show, and then they put me in this movie with him and Elijah Wood. Just like a little role or whatever, but a scene with both of them. It was a great little scene, and he just plopped me. And that's the kind of thing he does. Like, he gave Johnny Depp his first audition. You know what I mean? Like he does that kind of stuff. He's an interesting cat.
That's awesome.
Really, but that was a cool run-in. We had Debbie Gibson came backstage at one point. We had. Who else? We actually got to perform with a bunch of people too, because like a lot of times, like we would, somebody would be coming, and we knew that, and we worked in a fun encore, right, where they came up and jammed with us. Like Taylor Hicks, who did American Idol, and he was playing in Vegas for a while. He came and jammed with us. The Righteous Brothers, we did a song with them. Like,
it's awesome.
Like all kinds. I'm probably missing a couple, but there was like a senator that came through and took pictures with us at one point, and we got to meet the original drummer from the actual Million Dollar Quartet session. Fluke Holland is his name. He showed up and he told us
awesome,
fantastic stories.
Oh, I'm sure he had some stories, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Marc Donovan, awesome to be on Rock and Roll Fridays. 2 years in the making. Yes, I see you every day, and we finally got you on my podcast.
And I love that we're doing this from like about 20 feet apart,
30 feet apart. We're virtual. Well, awesome. So everyone should check out Marc Donovan. Google him, find him. Great actor, great performer. And thank you so much for being on Rock and Roll Fridays.
My pleasure. Thank you, sir. I'll see you soon.
See you.